Chapter 11, School. He brought them a low type of egg cup filled with hot water and a corner cut off the big cake of soap to wash with. They stood looking at each other at either side of the bowl, and Little Bear stripped off his bandolier, which left him naked to the waist, and he lost no time plunging his arms in and began energetically rubbing the whole top part of his body with his hands, wet hands, throwing water everywhere. He made a lot of noise about it, and he seemed to be enjoying himself, though he ignored the soap. Boone, that was a different matter. Omri had already noticed that Boone was none too fussy about being clean, and in fact, he didn't look as if he'd washed or shaved in weeks. Now he approached the hot water gingerly, eyeing Omri as if to see how little washing he could get away with. "Come on, Boone, off with the shirt. You can't wash your neck with your shirt on," Omri said briskly, echoing his mother. With extreme reluctance, shivering theatrically, Boone dragged off his plaid shirt, keeping his hat on. "I should think your hat could do with and your hair could do with a wash too," said Omri. Boone stared at him. "Wash my hair?" he said incredulously. "Washing my hair for swimming or for women. 'Tain't for men." But he did consent to rub his hands lightly over a piece of soap, though grimacing as though it was some slimy dead thing, and he washed at least his palms of his hands. Then he rinsed them hastily, smeared some water on his face, reached for his shirt without even drying himself. "Boone," said Omri sternly, "just look at Little Bear. You called him dirty, but at least he's washing himself thoroughly. Now, just do something about your neck and under your arms." Boone's look was of stark horror. "Under my arms? And your chest. I should think I'm not taking you to school all sweaty." "Heck, don't you go running down sweat. It's sweat that keeps a man clean." Oops, dropped my book, sorry. After a lot of bullying, Omri managed to get him to wash at least a few poor bits of himself. "You have to wash your clothes sometime, too," he said, but this was too much for Boone. "Ain't nobody gonna touch my duds, and that's final," he said. "Ain't been washed since I bought 'em. Water takes all the stuffing out of good cloth. Without that, dust and sweat, they don't keep you warm no more." At last they were ready, and Omri pocketed them and ran downstairs to breakfast. He felt tense with excitement. He'd never carried them around the house before. It was too risky, but not so risky as taking them to school. He felt like having the family breakfast was secretly in his pocket was some kind of training for school. Breakfast at his house was often a dicey meal anyways, with everybody more or less bad-tempered. Today, for instance, Ada lost his football shorts and was blaming everybody in turn. And the mother had just discovered that Gillian, on the contrary to all of his assurances last night before he had watched the television show he wanted to, had not finished his homework. And then there was Father. He was very grumpy because, again, he had wanted to do some gardening and it was raining again. "I know I put them in the laundry basket," he said fretfully. "If you did, I washed them, and in which case they are back in your top drawer," said his mother. "But you didn't, because I didn't, and they're not. So now listen to me, Gillian." It was a bit of history. A mini little castle draw with tiny paragraphs to write," said Gillian. "I can do it at school." "Stinking climate," muttered the father. "Those onion sets will rot, and if I don't get them in soon." "Gillian, did you borrow them?" "I've got my own." Omri ate his cereal in silence, grinning to himself, hugging his little secret. He slipped a couple cornflakes into his pockets. "I bet Omri took them," said Adel suddenly. Omri looked up. "Took what?" "My shorts." "What on earth would I want your shorts for?" "It might be your idea of a little joke to hide them," Adel retorted. And that was not outrageous as it sounds. It had, until very recently, been a commonplace of revenge. When Adel or Gillian had been repeatedly unbearable, Omri would sneak some valued possessions of theirs and hide it. However, Omri felt far away from such babyish right now, and he was quite insulted. "Don't be stupid," he said. "So you did," said Adel in triumph. "I did not." You're red in the face. That's proof you're guilty. I swear, said Omri. They're probably under your bed, said his mother. Go and have a look. I've looked everywhere. Oh my God, it's starting to hail now, said their father despairingly. So much for the apple blossoms. Under the cover of the moans, when he went upstairs to check out under the cover of the moans, they went up and about the prospect of no apples in the autumns and exclamations about the size of the hailstones. Omri slipped a coat on and ran through the bouncing ice bumps to school. On the way, he stopped under a yew tree, to look to see the little men. He showed them a large piece of hailstone, which was about the size of a football to them. Now, when we get to school, said Omri, you must stay very still and very quiet in my pockets. I'm putting you in separate ones because I don't want to risk any fighting or quarreling. I don't know what will happen with you two. Danger? Said Little Bear, with his eyes gleaming. Yes, there is danger, not of death so much, but you might be taken away from me, and I'd never get you back to your own time. You mean we'd never wake up with this here out of drunken dream, said Boone. If that's how you look at it, well then yes. But Little Bear was staring at him very thoughtfully. Own time? He said musingly. Very strange magic. Omri had never arrived at school with more apprehension in his heart. Not even a spelling test days, and he was yet excited too. Once he had taken the white mouse to school in his blazer pocket, he planned to do all sorts of fiendish things with it, like putting it up a teacher's trousers legs. He had a male teacher then. Or down the back of a girl's neck, or just putting it on the floor and let it run around and throw the whole class into chaos. But he hadn't actually dared to do anything with it except let it peep out of his pocket to make his neighbors giggle. This time, he had no such plans, as he was hoping that he could get through the day without anybody finding out. Patrick was waiting for him at the gate. Have you got him? Yes. His eyes lit up. Give him. I want him. All right, said Omri, but you have to promise that you won't show him to anybody. Omri reached into his right-hand pocket, closed his fingers gingerly over Boone, and placed him on Patrick's hand. The moment Omri let go of him, things started to happen. A particularly nasty little girl called April had been running across the playground at the moment of the transaction when Patrick sighed in about 2 seconds later. What have you got there? What did he give you? She asked in her raucous, annoying voice like a crow's. Patrick flushed red. Nothing. Push off, he said. At once, April pointed her witchy little finger at him. Look, Patrick is blushing. Patrick is blushing, she squawked. Several other children arrived at the scene. A certain type of child, whenever somebody is getting taunted, will do that. And soon Patrick and Omri found themselves surrounded. What's he got? I bet it's something horrid. I bet it's a slimy toad. I bet it's a wiggly worm. More like a beetle. Like him. Omri felt his blood begin to boil, and his head became hot. He longed to bash every one of them, or better still, at all, a giant knocking down hordes of enemies like skittles. He imagined them all rolling backwards down the wide flight of steps in waves bowled over by flashing fists and flying feet. But the best he could manage right now, in reality, though, was to lower his head and keep his hand cupped stiffly over his left pocket and barge through the chanting circle. He caught one of them a good butt in the stomach, which was rather satisfying. Patrick was hot on his heels, and they belted across the playground and in through the double doors, which fortunately had just been opened. Once inside, they were relatively safe. There were teachers all over the place, and any kind of fighting or taunting above a sly pinch or snide whisper was completely out. Patrick and Omri slowed to a walk. Then they found their places and sat down, trying to look perfectly calm and ordinary and not to attract any teacher's attention. Their breathing gave them away, though. Well, you two are puffing about. You been running? They glanced at each other and nodded. So, as long as you haven't been fighting, she said, giving them a sharp look. She always behaved as if a little fight was a long step in a long road to Hades. Neither of the boys got much work done. during the morning. They couldn't concentrate. Each of them was too aware of the passenger in his pocket. Both Little Bear and Boone were restless, particularly Little Bear, who naturally lazier. Boone was lazier. He kept dozing off in the dark and then waking up with a jump, which made Patrick very nervous. But Little Bear was scrambling about the whole entire time. It wasn't until third period when all the math in the math hall to the headmaster, whose name was Mr. Johnson, announcing his plans for the end of the year's show, that Little Bear got really sick and tired of being imprisoned, and he started to take drastic action. First thing Omri knew was a sharp prick in his hip, like if an insect had stung him. For a moment, he was silly enough to think or even a wasp or ant had somehow gotten in his clothes, and he just stopped himself before instinctively smacking his hand against to squash it. Then came another jab, sharper. First sharp enough, in fact, that make Omri give a short yelp. "Who did that?" Mr. Johnson asked irritably. Omri didn't answer, but the girls near him began giggling and staring. "Was that you, Omri?" "Yes, well, something sort of stuck into me." "Patrick, did you stick a pencil into Omri?" Such a thing was not unknown to happen during assemblies, especially when they were bored. "No, Mr. Johnson." "Well, be quiet when I'm talking." Another jab. This time, Little Bear meant business. He kept his knife embedded, and Omri shouted, "Ouch!" and jumped to his feet. "Omri, Patrick, leave the hall." "But I didn't." Patrick began. "Out, I said," shouted Mr. Johnson furiously, and they left. Patrick was walking normally, but Omri was dancing all about, singing, "Ow, ow, ow." Every little step, Little Bear kept digging the needle point of his knife in. The whole school was in hysterics laughing, and Mr. Johnson frothing with rage. By the time he reached the swing doors, and they departed. Outside they ran. While Patrick ran, Omri performed a sideways leaps and as far at the end of the playground as they could get. On the way, Omri plunged his hand into the pocket, seized Little Bear, and dragged him out with the agony stopped, safe in the sheltered corner behind the privet bushes. Omri held his persecutor at eye level and shook him violently the way he would shake a bottle of medicine. He called him the worst names he could possibly think of, and then, when he ran out of swear words, which took him for a long time, he hissed to Mr. Johnson, "What do you mean by it? How dare you? How dare you stick your knife into me?" "Little Bear dare?" Omri kept in dark. Too many hours. Little Bear want to see school, not lie in dark place. No breathe, no see. Want enjoy. I warned you you wouldn't like it. It's not my fault. You made me bring you. Now you've gotten me into trouble. Little Bear looked mulish, and he stopped shouting. Seeing the evidence that the truce was on its way, Omri calmed down a little bit too. "Listen, I can't let you see because I can't take you out. You have no idea what would happen if I did. If any of the other children saw you, they'd want to grab you and toss you about. You'd hate it, and you'd be in terrible danger too. You'd probably get hurt or even killed. You've got to lie quiet until school's over. I'm sorry you're bored, but that's your fault." Little Bear thought this over, and then he said, most astonishing thing, "Want Boone." "What? Your enemy?" "Better enemy than alone and dark." Patrick had taken Boone out of his pocket. The little cowboy was sitting on his hand. They were gazing at each other, and Omri said, "Boone, Little Bear says that he's lonely and he's bored." "Well, ain't that just too bad," said Boone sarcastically. "After he tried to kill me and now he's come all over lovey-dovey. Listen, you redskin," he shouted through his cupped hands across the yawning gulf between Patrick and Omri. "I don't care how lonesome you're. Don't you come, and I don't care if you drop down dead. The only good Indian's a dead Indian. Do you hear me?" Little Bear turned his head away haughtily. "I think he's lonely too, really," said Patrick, whispering. "He's crying. That's all he's been doing." "Oh, no, not again," said Omri. "Honestly, Boone, at your age." Just then, the head teacher was calling from them to the school door. "Come on now, you two. You're not got the whole day off now." "Give me your knife," said Omri to Little Bear on a sudden impulse, "and then I'll put you together." With only the moment's hesitation, Little Bear handed over the knife. Omri slipped it into his breast pocket of his shirt, which was empty, and there it would not easily get lost. Then he said to Patrick, "Let me have Boone." "No, just for the next lesson, and then lunchtime you can have both of them. They'll keep each other company. They can't do each other much danger in a pocket." Reluctantly, Patrick handed Boone over. Omri held them both in each hand where they were face to face. "Be good, you two. Try talking to each other instead of fighting. But whatever you do, don't make any noise." And he slipped them both into his left-handed pocket, and he and Patrick ran back into the school building.